This set of videos will dig into the concepts behind the games. What can we learn from the games that we play? Why did World War I happen? Well, there are numerous underlying events that led up to the outbreak of World War I on July 28, 1914. Four major causes for World War I include nationalism, imperialism, militarism, and alliances. An acronym of these causes is MAIN, but watching these videos in the order displayed shows how these concepts build upon each other. Militarism is defined as a policy of aggressive military preparedness. With the failure of the concert of Europe after the Crimean War in 1853, a period of relative peace between the European powers ended. With the blood and iron tactics of military conquest used by the Germans to defeat Denmark, Austria, and France with ease between 1864 and 1871, the other European nations saw the threat posed by the Germans and earnestly prepared for the potential for conflict. While European nations had spread their influence and might around the world through imperialism, their grand power as individual countries made them fearful of one another, further driving military expansion to match their opponents in military strength. Germany maintained a culture of military preparedness that allowed them to keep their military vibrant and prepared for a breakout of war in 1914. The German military was large, structured, and efficient in its preparation of soldiers to fight for their country. Concerns about Russia also kept the Germans diligent. France, chastened by its defeat at the hands of the Germans in 1871, built the Maginot Line, fortresses all along the border of France and Germany in preparation for another German assault. The French built up their military strength and leveraged an expanding empire to prepare themselves in case war with the Germans arose again. The Russians realized they were behind the other Europeans after the disaster of a conflict that was the Crimean War in 1853. They put great effort into improving their military and catching up to the other nations. Their efforts were slowed by attempted uprisings against the Tsar throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s. As well as an embarrassing short war against the Japanese where Russia sailed its European navy to Asia only to have it destroyed by the more modern Japanese fleet. Great Britain did not expand their conventional military in the same way as their continental European neighbors did. Instead, the British updated and expanded their naval power to protect the British Isles, but also as a practical measure to protect the waterways that were necessary to maintain their expanded worldwide empire. Austria had a complex military setup due to its dual monarchy. The country had what was called a tripartite army, including the Austrian army, Hungarian army, and a third royal army that was a general army for the entire empire. This created potential complications for efficient distribution of military resources when war would break out later. Unrest within the borders of the empire and disputes over land on the western reaches of the empire with Italy made it necessary to prepare for a conflict in which Austria would eventually become one of the first movers in the chessboard of Europe. The leadership in the Ottoman Empire was taken over by the Young Turks in the early 1900s. Included in many reforms was an attempt to westernize and revitalize the Ottoman military. The Ottoman Empire was viewed as the sick man of Europe by many other European powers, and the Ottomans had been slowly pushed out of Europe since they had been defeated at the Battle of Vienna in 1683. Their attempt to prepare their military for battle was an attempt to reestablish their legitimacy as a major player in European politics. The United States had built a state-of-the-art navy in the late 1800s and early 1900s. While Theodore Roosevelt had used the Great White Fleet to project American power around the world, the United States did not expend the same effort and focus in the early 1900s preparing the United States for war. Instead, the progressive era brought many domestic reforms in the United States, including politics, business, and the creation of the national parks. Additionally, there was greater focus on what was happening in Latin America, particularly in Panama, where the United States spent years trying to crack the code of how they would build the Panama Canal before finally finishing in 1914. The American industrial sector had immense capacity in the early 1900s, but it was not being used to develop a war machine in the United States prior to World War I. Europe was at a high level of military readiness in the years leading up to World War I. The tension created by the military buildup created distrust between the major powers in Europe. With distrust came negative assumptions about neighbors, and finally a willingness to enter war quickly against their opponents. Little did they know that this military preparation would make for a great defensive war, but would lead to horrifying results on the battlefield in terms of human life and the style of fighting that was required to fight in this war.